Hello, I'm back. Sorry I was away for so long. What happened was the last video that I posted got taken down by YouTube. It's still available on all the other platforms that I posted it on, so why don't you go and follow me there. But basically, they told me that I was spreading COVID misinformation for reading off the CDC website. And the big mistake I made was interpreting those results. So I gave 100% completely establishment information, but then I decided against YouTube policy that I was a free-thinking individual who could interpret those results and give my opinion on that, and that was my mistake. So even though I actually didn't have any misinformation in that video, they took it down. Anyway, that kind of coincided with Puerto Rico, where I live. Great place, great tax incentives, but Puerto Rico has unfortunately implemented a vaccine passport, which means that unless you want to show your papers, you're not allowed to go out to eat. Really lost motivation to make videos for a little bit, but I'm back. I'm not going to stop making videos just because YouTube censored me and because the world is going crazy. In fact, that just means I should be making more videos, posting them in more places, posting them more frequently, and speaking my mind about these truths, which they're obviously labeling misinformation, but it's not misinformation. Anybody with half a brain can see what's going on in the world. I have a few things from the news that I wanted to talk about today, just to kind of hammer home this point, to have these fact checkers shutting people up, basically saying that there's one truth out there for everything. They're the ones that are going to interpret that truth. They're the ones that are going to tell you what's right, what's what. And if you misinterpret that even a little bit, if you veer off of their line of thinking even a little bit, you are the enemy. People in power are trying to take more power. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's what people in power have always done. They're going to use a crisis to try to gain more power. If they don't have a crisis, they're going to create one, prolong one, or just keep people in fear, thinking that there is a crisis. So for a long time, that crisis was terrorism, and that's what we've been doing in Afghanistan for 20 years. The Pentagon admitted that the drone strike they carried out in Afghanistan did not hit an ISIS-K member, but actually took out 10 civilians, which included 7 children. The main target was a U.S. aid worker, and he made the mistake of driving colleagues to work and then loading up water canisters in his truck. So they basically said, oh, there's a preponderance of evidence. Like, he looks kind of sketchy. Let's blow him up.
So you don't know if it was an aid worker or an ISIS-K operative?
I can't speak to that, and I can't speak to that in this setting in any event.
So you don't know or won't tell us?
I don't know because we're reviewing it.
Well, see, you'd think you'd kind of know before you off somebody with a Predator drone, whether he's an aid worker or he's an ISIS-K.
This is why, I never thought it was immoral to try to legally reduce your tax bill. That's basically the one thing that you can do to help distance yourself from these immoral things that they do with your money. Anyway, at the same time, it was revealed that the top Pentagon official, General Milley, when Trump was still in office, went behind the commander-in-chief's back and told his counterpart in China that he would warn him in advance if Trump decided to take any military action against China. So that's literally the definition of treason, to warn your enemy of your own country's military actions, basically confirming everything, what they would call the right-wing extremists believe about the deep state and the bureaucrats in power who are really running things behind the scenes. So this does nothing to stop the conspiracy theories. It's only going to spark more conspiracy theories because the conspiracy wasn't a theory. There was a conspiracy to commit treason. So that's what's going on with the military. Meanwhile, of course, Biden gave his speech about his patience wearing thin, a speech a dictator would make, not an American president, the land of the free. Okay? We don't care how thin your patience is wearing with people making medical decisions for themselves. It doesn't matter. Our patience is actually wearing thin with authoritarian tyrants and dictators. That patience of the American people is wearing thin. And you see it cracking, basically, at all corners. And one of these cracks has shown over the last week with a singer, Nicki Minaj, basically going against the establishment and being dragged by this left-wing crazy media. Nicki Minaj said she wasn't going to go to the Met Gala, the one where AOC was wearing her tax the rich dress amongst a bunch of millionaire and billionaires who paid $30,000 each to get a ticket to the Met Gala. Anyway, Nicki Minaj says she's not going because she said, I'm not going to get vaccinated for the Met Gala. She still has some concerns for herself with the safety of it. So she's skipping this stupid gala that who cares about anyway. So people start talking about this. The media starts talking about it. Tucker Carlson runs a segment on it. And so Nicki Minaj retweets this segment that Tucker is backing her up on and saying, it is her choice. And somebody replies and says, he's a white nationalist, right? Of course, anybody that disagrees with you is a white nationalist. If you have an opinion that's not exactly the same as your political party, as your movement, then that makes them a white nationalist. Of course. You don't need to support that with any evidence. You can just say it and it becomes the truth. You disagree with me, white nationalist. Okay. So this Nicki Minaj replies, right. I can't speak to, agree with, or even look at someone from a particular political party. People aren't human anymore. If you're black and a Democrat tells you to shove marbles up your ass, you simply have to. If another party tells you to look out for that bus, stand there and get hit. I mean, she made her point perfectly. Is that people care so much about anything that that one party says is white supremacy. Even if they're telling you to look out for a bus, you have to stand there and get hit because you're not allowed to look at or listen to that party at all. But the other party, they tell you to shove marbles up your ass, you better do it. And this is just the way that Democrats, of course, view black people and the black vote. They really do not like when a black person goes out and contradicts their narrative. That person is then attacked. Nicki Minaj shares these screenshots of somebody from the Guardian newspaper trying to contact one of her relatives in Trinidad to try to get some sort of comment about this story. So finally, they basically make a threat. They say, I know you are hesitant to speak with us, but just letting you know, CNN is in the country, Trinidad. CNN is in the country looking for you. And when they find you, they won't hesitate to reveal where you live or where your girlfriend lives, anything and anyone who is tied to you. If you speak to me, we won't reveal those details. So what do you say? That's a threat. Oh, CNN might find you, and they're not going to be as nice as us. This is like good cop, bad cop from the media or something like that. They're all crazy. They're all absolutely out of their minds. Attacking the singer, she had the nerve to step off the Democratic plantation and say something that wasn't approved by the mass media. And you can just see how they turn on her, surround her, and just start throwing rocks, essentially. Who cares about celebrity worship? But it's just nice to have somebody who's the media actually pays attention to stand up and be like, this is dumb. You're dumb. Maybe we're not doing this anymore. So those are the cracks that are encouraging to see. Of course, on the other end, what's not encouraging is that the federal government is acting more and more like a dictatorship. Here's what the headline is. Biden administration moves to stave off shortages of monoclonal antibodies. So these are the antibodies supposed to stop the worst of COVID infections. How is the Biden administration going to stave off shortages? By nationalizing the industry. Forget history. Forget that every time the government takes over an industry and starts distributing things from the top down, or starts saying that we're going to have centralized rationing of a product, that's never worked. It always leads to shortages. But the headline says that the Biden administration move is to stave off shortages. So it's just a complete reversal of what's actually going to happen. They just take what the politicians saying, oh, we're doing this to stop shortages. And that becomes the news. We'll report that as news. The Washington Post. People are supposed to take this seriously. And so they nationalize this industry. They take over it and say that from now on, you have to ask the federal government for permission. These hospitals and these sites have to ask the federal government for permission to get these monoclonal antibodies. The White House says we'll be distributing these from now on. And guess what? They're probably not going to be giving them to the states which disagree with them politically, which aren't following their dictatorial health orders to get vaccinated. An example of the media colluding with the government to feed you a lie and to give them more power over state governments over private hospitals, over a product, which is saving lives right now. And the government is going to now be withholding that in their discretion. The Federal Reserve, you're supposed to, that they print the money. They're allowed to buy securities. They're allowed to just print money and pump it into the stock market. Oh, and it turns out all these Fed presidents of each of the branch banks who get to decide which of these stocks to print money and pump that money into own the stocks that they're pumping money into. They owned the securities that the central bank bought, pumping up the price per share of things that they owned. Just an insane conflict of interest. And again, we're supposed to trust these people with the US dollar, with the stability of the US dollar, with the market. You know, we're going to keep pretending that this is capitalism, the government basically printing money and pumping money into the stock market. We're going to pretend that that's a free market and not literally the people that get to make that decision enriching themselves because they bought the stock that they're now pumping up. But, you know, we should probably trust the Federal Reserve. You know, they get to set interest rates too. I'm sure they're not doing anything sketchy with interest rates. I mean, let's just keep going through the list of these people that you can't trust because it's at every turn. And this is what's their narrative, I think, is cracking. I think there are more people waking up to this and realizing that they're all full of shit. Half of COVID hospitalizations turned out not to be serious. So this was a VA study, so it only looked at people getting admitted to Veterans Affairs hospitals. 47,742 COVID hospitalizations were examined. What happens is anytime somebody comes into the hospital, they test them for COVID. And then if they have COVID, they become a COVID hospitalization, even if that's not why they're there. What they found, what the study found, was that the disease severity in the vaccine era among hospitalized patients was lower among both unvaccinated and vaccinated patients. So they considered a severe case if the patient required oxygen or dropped below a 94% blood oxygen saturation. 45% of unvaccinated patients and 57% of vaccinated patients had a mild case of COVID. So half of the hospitalizations that you're hearing about, the overwhelming of the hospitals, that's not even a severe case of COVID. They don't need to be in the hospital for COVID at least. They might be in the hospital for something else, but not for COVID. I mean, maybe this will get this video taken down too. I'm obviously going to link to the study. I'm linking to everything that I talk about. Another one, 26 of 27 scientists who signed the letter that helped ban the lab leak theory turned out to have ties to the lab. So there's the theory that the virus leaked from the lab in Wuhan. So Peter Daszak writes this letter and says that's anti-Asian hate to say that the virus might have leaked from this lab. We can't investigate it, but that's anti-Asian hate. And 27 scientists signed this letter. Peter Daszak bundles grants that the federal government gives out, and some of those grants he sent to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Obvious conflict of interest. Now, the scholarly journal, which published this letter, eventually went back and said, oh, by the way, there's a gigantic conflict of interest with the guy that's pushing this letter. They also didn't make any of the 27 other scientists disclose their conflicts of interest. But it's come out that almost every single one of the scientists that signed that letter are in some way related to people that work at the Wuhan Institute of Virology or who have funded, and organizations which have funded that institute. They are not impartial third parties. There's not a scientific consensus. There's not the science. And you obviously can't blindly trust the experts because a lot of them do have conflicts of interest. So what's that we can't trust just from the few things that we've talked about in this video that have happened over the last couple of weeks? We got the military, the White House, the media, the scientists, the social media, the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States. So the whole narrative over the last year and a half has been about people's health. What they really kind of don't talk about much is how if you're in good health already, the COVID poses a much less serious risk for you. The vast majority of people who are having serious cases are obese, and yet the government's actions, the lockdowns and the restrictions over the last year and a half have increased the rate of obesity. The number of states with high obesity rate nearly doubles since 2018. Number of states with an obesity rate of at least 35% has nearly doubled in 2 years. 16 states reported last year that at least 35% of their adult residents are obese. So people are getting fatter and fatter while you're told to sit home, do nothing, and take an injection, and that's health. Obesity in children accelerated during the pandemic. Who could have thought that canceling, and then of course kids are another group that is the least susceptible to COVID, and yet they were locked down and masked and told that they can't get together with friends and that they can't go out and exercise. Obesity in children accelerated during the pandemic, and these are going to have long-term consequences. So they talk about saving one life. They're not saving lives. They're killing people. They're killing people with heart disease. They're killing people with suicide. That's neither here nor there right now, but that's the mental health crisis, the drug addiction crisis. They can ignore all that because the only thing that matters right now to them is COVID. The average body mass index increase for children and teens approximately doubled between 2018 and 2020. About 22% of the children and teens were obese last August, up from 19% a year ago. They're killing civilians in Afghanistan. They're making people fatter. They're making kids fatter. They're getting rich through the stock market. While manipulating the stock market. The ones who get to choose the interest rates and how much money is printed and where that money goes. Huge conflicts of interest. The scientists, they all have conflicts of interest. The media is just a rabid pack of hyenas which turns and circles anybody who says anything that's counter to the narrative. This is where we're at. And this is a lot of the pressures that I was feeling, that this is just why I didn't have the energy to make a video. So what I've been doing basically is reading some Stoicism, reading some Buddhism, meditation, and it's not to say that you shouldn't care about these things, but it makes sense to take a step back and not let them affect you, not let them put you in fear, not let them make you feel overwhelmed. I don't really think that they have as much power as they like to make it look like they have, but there's undoubtedly evil people involved here making these decisions for people and trying to force us into unhealthy lifestyles and trying to control us. And they either don't care how unhealthy it makes us mentally, physically, or they want that, because then those unhealthy people are easier to control. You can't just ignore all this, unfortunately. You can't just step away because it does affect your life. A lot of people are getting fired from jobs because of an unconstitutional, completely arbitrary, dictatorial edict that the president made. So these things do affect you, so you can't just check out. But what you can do is take care of that mental health. And you don't have to engage. You can see what's happening and understand that. And then the Stoicism, realize what you have control over and what you don't have control over. You do have control over your own health. You can go outside and exercise and get sun and eat healthy and eat right. And you can grow your own food. These are things that you have control over. And you can not give into the fear. You can see your friends. You can speak truth to your friends. Maybe you have to go around social media to do that. Maybe you have to call them directly, meet them in person. There's a lot that we have control over, and there's a lot that we can do outside of this system. And what the solution that I keep coming back to, because this is what I've spent a lot of time thinking about over the last month while I haven't been making videos, while this has been bothering me. What can you do? And I come back to this idea that we basically have to build a parallel economy so that people can opt out. So there's a vaccine mandate to go to your restaurants. We can build this parallel economy where we don't have a restaurant, but we have a club where people come and share food and make food for each other. And no, sorry, we're not subject to your, public health edicts. We're a club. We're not charging people for food. We're not a restaurant. This isn't open to the general public. You don't have the right to regulate us for that. And you don't have to advertise it. You don't tell everybody what you're doing necessarily, but you don't do anything illegal either. They have all sorts of rules about butchering meat and who you can sell that to. So you don't butcher your cow and sell your cow's meat to people. You sell the cow while it's alive. You sell a share of that cow to whoever wants it. And then you raise it for them and you feed it for them. You butcher it for them and you distribute their meat to them. So these are just examples of ways that you can get around this very highly regulated authoritarian economy and start building that side economy. The Federal Reserve is clearly manipulating interest rates, the stock market. They're being extremely irresponsible with printing money, and that is going to make your dollars less valuable. Luckily, we have this amazing thing called cryptocurrency that is already building a parallel economy, so we don't have to rely on these centralized institutions. You can't trust the education system. Luckily, you can homeschool. And there's a lot of support that you can get to homeschool. More people than ever are homeschooling. I just saw a headline about a teacher who quit and now teaches 5 homeschool kids in a little pod, and they pooled money and paid her. That teacher's doing better. Those kids are going to be better off. Those parents are better off. It's better for everybody. Side economy. Not illegal or anything, but it's a parallel economy. We're building structures that don't play into their games. So like I said, I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm just trying to give you a basic idea right now, but definitely subscribe on other channels, because again, we can't trust YouTube. Follow me on my email list, because then I can contact you no matter what happens, whoever tries to deplatform me. And what I'm going to be coming at you with is some really big, awesome ideas about how we can build these parallel economies and how we can structure ourselves to survive collapsing, incompetent institutions, which we have to currently rely on, and how we can survive these corrupt, aggressive institutions which may be coming after us if we're in the system. And so we just build this parallel economy, and I'm going to have a lot of information about how we can do that step-by-step basis, and different types of businesses that we can be building, and organizations, the way that this can be organized, and how that's going to help us survive and thrive during the turmoil, which is definitely coming. It's only going to get a little bit worse, maybe more than a little bit, before it gets better. So what we need to be doing now is building these structures. Then we can rebuild from these strong parallel economies that we have built. Definitely subscribe if that sounds at all like something that you'd be interested in. There's other videos that I've talked about this idea, and that is something I'm forging forward on, because it's very obvious that I'm not going to be able to live in their world for much longer. So the quicker I can build this parallel society, this bottom-up, strong, self-sufficient structure for me and the people I care about, and smart individuals that want to come into and help me build this, and coordinate with people out there like you who might be wanting to build their own or participate in this in some way, the better that's going to be. I'm really excited about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Joe Jarvis. I appreciate you coming back here. Sorry for being away for so long, but I'm back. I'll be posting more often now. Come back and see me again soon.